Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome back for another week. A nice, slower paced week, maybe with some slower paced information on stuff that's going on in the garden compared to last week, which was just crazy, chock full of information. If you haven't listened to that episode, definitely roll back and check that out for sure. Um, but this week here, where it's just Brian, Kevin, and I, and we're catching up in the garden first, and then we're gonna get to questions. So hopefully we get some people here and get some questions streaming. Um, so Kev from Oklahoma, looks like we're looking at the garden out there. He's got some connection issues going on right now, but we're hopefully can get a garden update from him.
Yeah, I'll probably just, if you can hear me, I'll get a shot of the garden. I'm going to go inside because there's bad connections tonight. Got some bunnies. But there's the garden. I'll go inside and tell y'all about what's going on in my garden. But right now, if y'all can see it and hear me, she's lush and pretty. We're pulling off a whole lot of, still a lot of food, a lot of flowers. Medicine plants are getting big.
Oh yeah. Can hopefully Genetic Memory Farm said no audio. If anybody else is having issues, let us know and we can maybe reset here. But we'll while Kevin's getting connected to his computer, we can run through what's going on in my garden here. And there is some good stuff going on in my garden. So back it up here. Right now, I've basically taken down all my cover pretty heavily back because we're entering into pretty good flower now. Like it's very clear that we're through a transition period. You can see that like just the little buds on that plant. That's a funky sativa kind of leaning plant. Looks like, and pick up please. I will do that. I'm gonna switch over to my other microphone here. Kev, why don't you go? Why don't we switch back over to you real quick while I do that, and tell us what's going on in your garden, brother.
All right. Get me up there. That's not my garden. I don't know whose garden that is. What's wrong with that garden? No, I'm joking. That's Mark's garden. Looking good. Got all that mulch down, extra grass down. Yeah, so wish we could be out there, but man, now it's time of the year when it's starting to get dark outside. And it's starting to get harder to see. So we're starting to lose a little bit of daylight again. However, what's going on in my garden is right now I'm trying to get seeds from a lot of stuff. So I'm trying to get seeds I've actually got them from peppers, from cucumbers. Cucumbers were early in the year. Some tomatoes, and then the marigolds. I'm getting those deadheading the marigolds, keeping the seeds, putting them in paper bags. I'm doing zinnias, sunflower seeds for sure. I've got bags full of sunflower seeds right now. That I'm going to kind of just use as some bird seed and some giveaway gifts and stuff like that, because it's all the sunflowers that I'm working with and just trying to breed. So I'm collecting lots of seeds. With zinnias, you want to cut them. Like whenever you got a zinnia growing up, they're pretty tall plants. They'll get about as tall as me, and they'll put off maybe 2 flowers. And you want to cut those flowers just as soon as those zinnias kind of start to wither. Cut those flowers, and then it's just like topping a cannabis plant. You're going to get 2 new flowers. And so then you want to cut those off again and get 2 new. And that's just how you get zinnias to grow out real well, is keep on topping them. And the best thing is just to bring them inside at the beginning of the year, make a nice flower arrangement on your table. Use those flowers for beauty on the inside. The flowers will actually mature the seed while it's in the water. And you can pull the little petals back and look at the tip of the zinnia seed, and you'll see a little black arrow kind of a thing, and that's the actual zinnia seed. And that's what you'll use next year to replant. But what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to basically choose the best zinnias. I've got some beautiful red. I actually just posted on my YouTube channel today a garden walkthrough. It's about 14 minutes long, just showing you everything that's going on. But I've got some beautiful red zinnias that are coming out, and they are, they're as big around as my palm. They show it in bigger than my palm, but they're real dark red, real beautiful yellow flowers on the top. And I've got some orange zinnias that are super large, super orange. They're really bright with the green tomato plant background. Those red and the orange and yellows pop really well. And so I'm trying to keep those plants and then, or to keep those seeds. But then I'm also collecting all of my zinnia flowers just so I have a big paper sack full of zinnia seeds. And I can scatter them wherever I want, send them to whoever I want, and just use them. They will get used eventually. I might even, go to the back by the creek and throw them out along there. And every once in a while, you'll get a zinnia plant to pop up if it's got enough sunlight. So that's what's happening with some seeds. The other things I'm doing is I've already popped a lot of seeds, and that's for the fall gardens that are coming up. You might have saw those bunnies in the earlier shot if it was working. I've got 3 bunnies out there right now, and I just went and checked, and they have eaten all of my bean plants for the second time now. So I planted bean seeds. I planted Blue Lake bean seeds. They grew up about that tall. They ate them. I planted some more in some cups and was able to put them on a little roller and try to move them. And they just walked right over there and ate them again. And so I've got new plants down, and they ate them just today. And so I've got to do something about the rabbits because I want peas, and I can get a lot of peas in the fall. But if they eat those stupid plants, I'm going to have issues with them. But I'm not going to hurt a rabbit or anything like that. I want the rabbits to stay. Mark was just telling me that we got some rabbit fencing, like chicken wire, rabbit wire, stuff like that.
They sell it. In like a Home Depot or like a home improvement store. It's usually over where like the heavy duty fencing is. It's not going to be in the in like the garden seasonal section, and it's got tighter because Kevin has some chicken wire and stuff up, but the little bunnies can get through those holes. So what this has is it's got like a 2-foot section on the bottom where it's tighter rungs, so they can't, as far as they can jump up whatever the manufacturer deemed was the right height. They made it tight so they can't get through, and it works really. It's the same price usually as that chicken wire too. So just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, something's going to be useful. I got to get something. One thing that I did use for the armadillos I've never used before were mothballs. Somebody last week mentioned mothballs, and I bought about 6 packs that are about that big and full of about 50 little balls, and they're covered with naphthalene, I believe is what it said. So it's a stinky petroleum, and you can really smell it. Even in my backyard, when I walk in there, I get whiffs of it. But it has kept the armadillos away because it's rained for the last week. We've had 2 good rains, and the armadillos have not come in my garden. They have stayed outside behind the fence in that back pasture back there, and they've been digging holes all out there. So I do believe that mothballs can help with armadillos in your garden. I seem to have evidence now. So that's been good because they will dig a hole so deep by a cannabis plant that it will fall over and kill itself.
Well, Kev, so I don't even honestly know what's in a mothball, but I would assume that it's the scent that's driving them away. So if you're worried about anything leaching into the soil, just put it in a cup.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just like, or like somehow protect it maybe from the rain so it doesn't get wet. But that's
on top of a 5-gallon bucket or inside laying down, things like that. Hanging.
Yeah, that's gold bar right there.
Yeah, it works. I mean, it is. It's definitely not bringing, thinking organically, but I'm above that. I'm thinking family. I grow. That's organically. That's my style. But I also understand that critters come in, and if I'm going to do all this freaking work and be hot and slave out there in the garden, because it's big now. I've got a lot of garden going on now, and it takes me and my wife to do the gardening now. She's out there having to help cut all the stuff and bring it in. We got to slice it, cook it, freeze it. We're storing our food and we're really using it for the wintertime. As best we can. We wouldn't live on it, but it will supplement some foods that we don't have to buy. That's the goal. So I don't need critters in my garden. I'm going to think about my family first. You know what? Let me tell you this story about my dad. Y'all know my dad was a farmer. He's kind of in his last days right now, but he was a farmer in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. They had the Burgess Fruit Market. And man, when I was a kid And we grew up, my dad had no problem just kicking the crap out of a dog or a cat or something like that would be in his garden or in his trash. You know, he shot animals before just because they're critters and they're tearing stuff up on the land. And I always was like, oh, that hurts me somehow. I don't like that feeling of just being able to do that. And he seemed to be numb to it. But, you know, we've had talks before where the point is this. He grew up not wearing shoes to school in Keys, Oklahoma, back in the day in the 1940s and 50s. They were poor. They were farmers. It was famine or feast. And in the springtime, they were able to sell a lot. And then it was just work, and live on what you better have harvested. And so they didn't have a lot of money. And animals in the garden were detrimental to your survival. That's just it. And so you kill it. And so that's a mentality that we really don't have to have. But back in the day, some people have to have it now, but I don't, thankfully. But back in the day, man, they had to kill stuff in your garden. And, you know, I don't want to do that, but I'll use mothballs to keep the dang armadillos out of my garden, you know, because I want my food, my medicine.
Well, and like rabbits would be a good example of kind of what you're talking about there, because they could have a heavy economic impact, especially if you're relying on food for your family, like beans and stuff. That, you know, you're getting to a point where you might miss the your window to plant, so it costs you and your family beans.
Yeah, exactly.
But now we have things like rabbit barriers, and we know a little bit more. So being able to steer the garden where you protect the plants that you know those rabbits are going to go after, you let them munch on the cover and everything else in the garden and crap all over the place, and that's all usable stuff. I mean, if you look at them kind of, if you kind of do look at it from like a managerial approach, they're actually on your team, in a way. You just need to keep them away from the money stuff. And luckily, I've never had a rabbit eat cannabis plants. I don't know about you guys.
Nope.
Maybe a deer, but never a rabbit. I don't think I've ever had an animal eat a cannabis plant ever, but like completely like that.
Yeah, June bug will chew it up more than
yeah. Well, and like your bugs and your pests and stuff.
Yeah.
So I think embracing things like the pests and using things that you have like mothballs to drive away the ones that, you know, but pest is kind of a loose term if we're talking about like a rabbit, because they can be on your team. So
yeah, they are. You're on the team.
Yeah, for
They
sure.
just need to know the rules. That's what they need to do. But yeah, I like rabbits. We got a lot of rabbits. So now let me say this. Okra going crazy. We are getting probably a half of a 5-gallon bucket every single day, and maybe more if it's a good rain and then good hot sun. It just produces fast. So okra is something, and this, guys, this is my experiment right now. It's going on in my backyard. What can I grow on a scale that is on my scale, right? What can I grow at my scaling that can actually feed my family and supplement some money and save some time and effort? And okra paying off like crazy, man. It's not giving up. It's been going for over a month now like that, just pumping out. So here in Oklahoma, really good thing, okra. Corn, I didn't have enough room or sunlight for corn. It likes to have a little more room and definitely a lot more sunlight than I had. So I tried corn. I did have some pieces that we ate, but it wasn't like everyone was big. Most of them are kind of small and underdeveloped. So the corn's not it. The cucumbers, they were fantastic. We had a great run of cucumbers. They can't handle the heat anymore, so they're gone. Beans, I've already had one run of beans, and we've got a freezer full of bean packs. And I'm trying to get new beans up for the fall just so we can get, you know, even more. Onions and potatoes, they did great early. They could be planted again right now if you wanted to. I'm doing other things right now. But we got a lot of onions still in the freezer from this spring that we're still using. My wife uses to cook. We have used a ton of tomatoes. She's made tomato soups. She's I think we've canned some. We've made salsas, pico de gallo, put them on BLTs, and the list goes on. You know, because here's the point I keep telling my kids. When we go to the grocery store, and these are the facts, these are studies, guys. These are studies that when you go to the grocery store, your average vegetable will have a nutrition range of about 30 different types of nutrients that are good for you, as opposed to indigenously grown food or your own garden grown food, which has a range of 80 different nutrients in them, just because of the way they're grown, the soil, the sunlight, organically grown, the microbiology working with the roots and the plants, doing exactly what needs to be done. Now, and I can tell you right now, that study, I heard the woman who did that study in Tahlequah about 3 years ago. She's a professor up in Minnesota. She deals with indigenous people, mainly the Cherokee people. And in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, that's the head of the Cherokee. That's the Cherokee national capital there. And so they have, the Cherokee people had just a Cherokee holiday, and they had all this information on farming and food and indigenously growing food and stay out of the supermarkets. And here's why. And she showed all these studies. Fantastic. So I'm just telling my kids constantly, like, if you go out there and eat a tomato, a little cherry tomato, it's like a vitamin. It has so many more nutrients in it if you'll just go eat one of those just every day. You don't have to eat a bunch. Just go out to the garden, pick a little something and eat them.
Yeah, great update. I have snacking tomatoes, which are like twice or three times the size of like a cherry tomato or grape tomato. My
Yeah.
son just goes out and eats one like a plum, like one or two a day. So,
Perfect.
and I have that growing like. Actually, I'll just show you my. We can switch into
Yeah. Let's look at that video.
my garden update. And just since we have more people on now than when we started and we were having technical issues, welcome back everybody. Uh, we're hoping to get questions for people that tuned in last week, weeks prior. If there's things that are kind of burning in your brain that you want to talk about, that's where we want to be with this episode, with this hour. It's kind of like a housekeeping episode, so we can kind of take a step back here and catch up with everybody. But also, just in the meantime, until we get those questions, we're just going to do a quick garden update. So, Kevin, great garden update and good reflection on kind of like the midsummer harvest so far there in Oklahoma.
Yep.
It's a similar story here. I haven't tried growing okra yet, so right off the bat, we're in transition now, pretty heavily. So the plants are starting to actually show signs of flower. They really blew up. They've grown probably 18 inches in the last 2 weeks. And so
Ooh, they stretched. Look at that. You can see that one
yeah,
plant stretched hard.
and I mean this plant right here is 8 feet tall, and it's probably more like 6.5 or 7 feet tall. But they're huge, and so my trellis system, it's kind of dark, and this was taken probably like a half an hour before the show started. But my trellis system right now is really simple. So I've got the 4 posts that are just nice pieces of either like pressure treated wood that I rip down into posts myself. So if you're ever looking for really good sturdy posts, don't go buy them pre-cut from Home Depot. They're way more expensive. Just if you have a table saw, rip down some pieces of pressure treated. You save yourself a boatload on that. But then I have free bamboo that I used around the sides. And it's just basically a box. So I have a box on the bottom holding up the lower branches and a box on the top, either peeling back some of the upper canopy to open it up or to hold back stuff as those big buds start to form and they start to get heavy and want to sway. So real simple approach right now. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to inlay bamboo as I need, because I'm out there every single day looking at these things, and I only have 4 of them, so or 5 of them. So it's really manageable size. That's something to consider when you're doing this. And then, so over here, part of that transition for me into flower is if you've seen before in pictures and stuff, that side looked like crazy. It was just basically full of, there was a pumpkin plant over there. There's still part of a pumpkin plant. You can't really see it right there, but it was full of comfrey, borage, cowpeas, buckwheat, stuff like that. So that came down like a week ago, or like this past week. And I put all that stuff, I took a lot of that, a lot of it I left. You can see it's like brown and kind of just getting taken back. Left a lot of it just to foster that ground and to feed that ground back. But a lot of it got put back underneath those plants. Like for whatever reason, I'm a believer in that comfrey magic that Marco likes to talk about, and a lot of the OGs like to talk about. So I I'm composting with a lot of comfrey leaves, borage leaves, like that right there is a pretty typical patch of what's growing, what was growing in that corner. So you've got like the yellow flowers, that's calendula. You've got white flowers, that's going to be the cowpeas. You've got blue flowers, so it's kind of hard to see. Blue flowers are borage, comfrey. There's no comfrey right there, but comfrey is definitely a big part of it. And yeah, just cutting everything back to get it away from the plant, because now is the time where I'm still opening up when I'm doing my defoliations. I'm still opening up bud sites on top to make sure that they're getting really heavy sun. But I'm also now starting to think about that those leaves that are touching the inner canopy, the stuff that's not going to make it out anymore. So my defoliation tactic kind of changes from more of maintenance to, in the next couple weeks, it'll be more heavy lifting, like cleaning up the insides of those plants so that we're not so touchy feely. So, yeah, great stuff going on out in my garden. And, talking to Kevin, it's kind of like, it's interesting because we've been talking every week through this entire outdoor grow season and seeing the contrast in the size. Oh, that's sweet. The size of the plants that Kevin grows in Oklahoma, they come out like they're huge early, right? And it's a little bit demoralizing for us northern folk that are like chomping at the bit to go. We're not even planted. You guys are 4 feet tall. But as you see in my garden, if you give them some love, you train them right, you just really, for me, like I didn't do much more than just topping and cleaning up the top leaves where there was growth, just letting it bush out, kind of trying to let it bush out as evenly as possible. I didn't scrog or do anything crazy like that. So it doesn't have to be very complicated, like building all these contraptions and stuff. But you do want to start thinking about supporting your plants, because once they start putting on that weight, and if you don't have a roof on like I do, and they start getting soaked by the rain, like Kev has, in his setup, you really have to consider supporting every one of those branches so they don't turn into these big floppy, snappy things. Because we're going for we're feeding right now and putting all these beautiful inputs for these big gorgeous plants. So to lose that right now by a quick snap is not what we're looking for, and it's a cheap fix. So think about supporting your plants like that, especially now. Like we're getting to the point now where it could be too late after the next storm.
Yeah, here's the thing that always happens. It did not happen to me this year because I have matured a little bit in my cannabis growing. Finally, I would always think about what I should be doing probably, but since it's not really happened yet, why do I need to do it? And then bam, it happens. Like, God dang it, and that I used to do that crap all the time, but now you're right, Brian. Every single branch, oh, well, almost the ones that are sagging, or I could tell we're going to sag, they are tied back to the main meristem. Every branch, that comes off the meristem, it's always tied just a little over halfway up, tied back to the meristem. It's not pulling, it's just able to allow the branch to rest right there. And when the wind comes, it'll bounce and, it's good to go. But I've lost so much to the branches just breaking because they're super heavy and they're pretty and beautiful, and you just want to let it go, and then snap, and you lost it all. Or I've had plants split right down the middle, like that, and you lose everything, not just something break off.
Everything. Yeah. Yeah, but I will also say, so a reflection for me from last year, right? So I have those. It's funny you say, like, thinking about it in the rear view is like the worst place to be, and like you saw in my video, I've only got plastic on one of my little greenhouses. I still got to get it on the other side. So I'm actually right there. Luckily, luckily, they're not like full blown flower, but I don't practice what I preach here, but definitely on the agenda for this weekend or early next week. But the reflection I had from last year was that so that there was plastic on the sides of that uh, greenhouse last year, and it's got windows, and I can roll up the sides and stuff. But when you cut off the airflow, like I'm trying it this year. So this year I'm cutting off, I even cut those gable sides up, right? Like the flat ended sides, they're high cut up all the way to the top of the arch.
Yeah.
So it comes down on the sides, sorry, like this, comes down on the sides, but it's open on the ends all the way up, right? So there's airflow all the way through there, and I'm trying it this year. But last year I struggled. I'd lost pretty heavy yield with PM, and I don't mess around with that stuff. So if there's any white stuff on that branch, it's it's pretty much it's going to be a chop job for the most part. So it's heartbreaking. That's one of the biggest fallacies I think is if you don't have a proper environment built inside of the greenhouse, don't go trapping the air from the outside. Let the air flow. Don't, like, for me personally, like another reflection is not using any really sort of like horticultural oils, as nice as they might be, as organic as they might be touted. I just think that it, like, beyond hurting the beneficial organisms, like the actual like bugs and stuff, I think that it actually hurts the chemistry on the leaf, and it hinders it from being able to defend itself, I believe. Like, I think it compounds your problems, whether it be pests like even spider mites. I feel like there'd be people on here that would be willing to say the same thing about spider mites. As soon as you start spraying for those, it seems to almost get worse. Like, it compounds and comes back with more ferocity. So it's the same thing with these microbials, these like PM and stuff like that. Like, if you cut off the airflow on those outdoor plants, man, I think that
Oh,
there's something big going on in the air out there that we can't explain. So consider
yeah.
that.
My yeah, another thing I didn't even talk about was the defoliation of all my medicine plants out there. They are huge, and it's not easy. Big plant. I had a goal to grow some big plants this year because last year I grew a lot of shorter plants that were kind of clones that we were running outside, see how they did, blah blah blah. This year I got to pop seeds from my breeding in the fall, so it's a lot more fun. And they can get big. Well, you get a good seed plant in the ground early, like I did. I had them in the ground in March, you guys. These most of the plants that are out there in my garden went through 4 freezes in early March or late March and early April that we had in Oklahoma.
With
And then
supplemental lighting, right, Kev?
do
Because
what?
with supplemental lighting, you had like your shop lights out there, right?
Yes, yes. I always have, if you have to, just because there's too much darkness still. And my house is a bit in a valley, and then I also have a lot of trees over here on the sunrise and the sunset side, and then I got trees in the middle. So I'm a half shade yard, but I can still get good big plants just simply because there is enough sun for them to grow and do what they need to do. They would probably be bigger if they had more sun, but they're very big right now. But they have to be cleaned out and thinned out because just like you said, Mark, I've got powdery mildew all over my zinnias. They just have it. That's what they do. They attract powdery mildew, and powdery mildew loves zinnias. And I spray regalia all over my zinnias often, and it does help. But there's some places on zinnias you're like, that is covered in powdery mildew. But it's always been like that. They've always been by my cannabis plants. It never has done any kind of effect or anything
It
like that.
doesn't, yeah, it doesn't translate usually. There's like a specific set of plants that have the same like strain that will afflict from a cannabis plant to others, if that makes sense. So like your squash and your stuff underneath, like I have watermelons growing like real close to one side. I got like a pumpkin plant that I have to like keep cutting back to one side too. Same story. It doesn't, you won't get PM from that. That's not really what you have to worry about. That's not necessarily what's going to be the issue. It's going to be the other stuff that you're probably about to talk about, thinning the plant out, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, the other parts are going to be the humidity issues. So we're going on about our third week of 100-degree days here in Oklahoma. It rained twice this week, a good heavy soaking rain where the ground is drenched. It's loose and a little muddy. The plants have sagged down hard, and they have sometimes it's helpful. Often they break if they're not tied up, but what will happen is on a good rain, big plants, it will make those outer branches sag, and then they'll hold long enough that they'll stay in place, and they'll be actually kind of spread out for you a little bit, and that opens the inside up somewhat. But the problem is anytime fan leaves touch each other, you're going to have an issue with bacteria and biology in between those two leaves that has its own heat. It's got its own moisture. There's no air being able to get in there. So you're getting a lot of the anaerobic things wanting to survive right there. So my goal is to have no fan leaves touching each other. Always gone. But then even if they're bigger sugar leaves touching each other, boop, rip them all off. I rip everything off up the middle eventually. In week 7 of flower, I'll have nothing but buds on the whole plant. That's it. And that's just like you said, I need airflow. Those buds get so big, the humidity will be at 90 to 100%. It'll be 100 degrees outside. We're going to go into a night that's going to be about 85. Then it's going to rain on you in the morning. It's over if you haven't already been dealing with what potentially might get on your buds. I just bought two oscillating fans today. I've already got one outside. I bought 2 new oscillating fans, and they're just going to go outside in front of all my big cannabis plants and just constantly blow. I don't care if it rains on them. It doesn't matter. It was $60 worth of fans, and I'm going to get, literally from a dispensary's point of view, $10,000 worth of hash rosin in the end, based on $50 a gram.
Or save yourself that much money to have the best quality meds on tap
Totally.
all effing year. And that's my goal at this point. And to be able to share it a little bit, with the homies. So along with that too, with like it might sound crazy what Kevin says about cleaning up all those fan leaves, but think about the loss that you incur and the struggle that probably if you've been growing multiple seasons outdoor, you've probably seen powdery mildew. Let's be honest. Unless you have a perfect setup and everything like that, or you're just doing a killer job, I mean, hats off to you. But these are the things that it takes to get to the finish line. Like, it's easy to get 90% there, but shit gets hairy when you start dealing with that jumping powdery mildew or bud rot, or the worst is caterpillars, man. You all of a sudden things look great, and you all of a sudden it catches your eye, and you're like, "Whoa, hold on." Half of that week 7 bud, it looks almost good enough to pick now, but it's not. It's not.
Not
And
really.
it looks almost good enough to pick now, and then half the bud dies, and you go, "What the fuck?" And then you're digging into that bud, and you find a caterpillar. All of a sudden you start noticing all the other ones around the garden. That's the wrong time to think about using BT Kerstaki. And I've been there personally, and I had to salvage a week 8 or week 9 harvest, and it was a fucking disaster. The crap all over my buds. It's horrific. It's as bad as PM. Somebody said PM and caterpillars, that's it right there with outdoor. If you're not ahead of those two things. But I guess what I wanted to add to what you were saying with the maintenance stuff, keeping it clean and airflow going, and lots of airflow, supplemental airflow is crucial. But there are things so a healthy plant, right? If you're giving lots of silica, your branches are going to be stronger. If you're giving things that provide chitinase, it's going to be more able to fight off pathogens, A, and B, it can sequester pathogens. So like whether or not it helps with PM is, Coots would say it does. Absolutely. He swears by like using barley in the garden, which is a heavy producer of chitinase. And if you watch a lot of these people that are sharing information online right now, a lot of people are talking about barley powders, and it's because it provides all the building blocks for the soil microbiology to produce the chitinase. So barley is a big one. That's why we use it in Benny Boost. It's like a dual threat because it also feeds the bugs. But something you can also consider as well is that. And then the only other thing I wanted to add on the kind of like where we are in transition is something to consider is like right now your plant's going through these hormonal changes. So things that you can do to provide those secondary metabolites and like hormones that they need. One would be qualia or quiyaya or whatever that you want to call it. It's got triterpenoid saponins in it, and that's going to help. That provides the cannabis plant actually uses triterpenoid saponins. Cannabis and quilaya share that. They both, one produces it and one uses it. So, and what it does is it helps with terpene production, helps with saponin production. So, rosin production. So something that you can do right now is up that dose of quilaya. If you're not using it, maybe consider it in a weekly or right now I'm using it every single water, and I use a product that we carry. It's called Regenerator. Very reasonably priced. You can get a 4-ounce bottle of it for like $23 shipped, and 4 ounces makes about 120 usable gallons. So for like a small grower, you're good. It's not $70 entry level stuff. It's $23 shipped. If you're looking for something more economical, like a pint makes 400 gallons. So just consider that there's other options out there that aren't so expensive for stuff like that. I know something Kevin would probably recommend is like plant ferments, because that's going to provide a whole-bodied, full-spectrum feed. And so just something else.
Your metabolite stuff you're talking about, yeah, with the lactobacillus breaking things down. Yeah, it's great, and it's quick. It's quick to make and easy. And you're talking about making your plants healthy at the beginning. One of the very first things I did this year was, as soon as the wild bamboo started putting out new shoots, I started breaking them off, and they are thick and juicy. And I chopped a ton of them up, put them in my JLF, and then I chopped a ton of them up, and I made fermented plant extract with it. And that was one of the first things I started feeding my plants, was that bamboo fermented extract. And then I moved on into horsetail extract making, and I've been feeding them horsetail extract this whole time. And that's why they're strong. They sway with the wind. They've been taking it, and they're good to go, man. They're super strong and pretty, and you can tell that they're thick. The branches are thick.
I think it's really important to supplement silica somehow.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, because if you want to grow honkers that aren't snapping in the first storm, this is that's fundamental. It's like, it's okay. You don't necessarily have to have it to be killing it, right? Especially if you have like an enclosure and you don't have to deal with the elements. But like, if you want to go to 110 or 115, as Marco likes to say, that's one of those things that you really want to consider in your arsenal. So if you have horsetail, you should be harvesting it and using that in ferments for sure.
You got to. Let me remind everybody listening, start asking a question about anything organically growing speaking that you want. And I'm going to pick the best question, and Kid Mac is going to send you a variety pack of the collab that we did this fall that was in place of the Belief collab. And it's what's growing in my garden right now. It's what's growing at his house. It's what's growing at Kid Mac or Fatbeard Pothead's place, and lots of other people around here. And they're looking fantastic. So start asking good questions. I'll choose the best one. Kid Max will send you a variety pack. It's going to be awesome.
Let's get into some questions, because we do have some. Brian, you want to flip those over?
Yeah, we got this one is more just I think a personal question for Kevin. What crosses are in your yard?
Let me tell you this. I visited Kid Mac's house today. Went into his backyard, and he has one of 4 blaze cherries across the peach pistols that we're running. I'm running 3 of them. He's got 1 of them. His is about 2 weeks ahead of mine. Man, it smells so good. We both said candy. We're both like, candy. And it's a fruity candy smell. So we've got the blaze cherries across the peach pistols. I got 4 phenos of those going. I've got 1 big Cherryana Grande across the peach pistols, and Fatbeard Pothead has one that he is just about to cut down probably this week if he hasn't already. Then I've got some Tropicana Punch Kid Matt gave me. Supposed to be a good cut, growing it out. I've got me and Ganja Farmer Genetics collab is the Squealer Killer that you probably heard of. That a lot of y'all listening have. It's all over my website often. I've bred with it many times. I have a Squealer Killer growing out. Just kind of see what she's like, and I've got her cloned up and ready to go if I like her. I've got straw jelly to peach pistols. These straw jelly washed at 5%. That's why we bred with straw jelly. That's why Kid Mac and I did a collab of the plant of the plant that he had. The straw jelly was an awesome one, and I bred a ton of stuff with it. So we tried to make a bunch of washers for Scissortail Solventless whenever he's able to start running plants again. We actually did that breeding run for thinking about taking it all to Scissortail's place and getting it washed. Then I've got what I call frosted fruits. Those are those big plants that are going. Frosted fruits are a variety. Guys, it's kind of a weird thing. It was the collab that I was supposed to do. I had already done some breeding, and then all the weird stuff happened with the other breeder. And I just was like, I don't know what to tell you. I just open pollinated, these things were open pollinated. And then I got seeds out of it, and I really don't even know what the crosses are at all. We'll just call it frosted fruits, but I've grown a ton of them out. Got a bunch of seeds of it. So that is going. It's kind of a weird strain. I don't know anything about it. I'm learning right now, just starting to grow these things out and see what they are. A lot of the other strains are all mine. I've grown them out many times, but then everybody is getting pollinated by a beautiful male Cherryana Grande that's out there, and she's pollinating everybody. Let me tell you this. 2 days ago, early in the morning, about 6 in the morning, I'm looking outside, and I'm like, my wife, I was like, do you see smoke in the garden? And she's like, I don't know. And I was like, there it is again. There's a puff of smoke coming out of the garden. And I walk out there, and it's that male cannabis plant getting gusts of wind and just clouds of pollen blowing right over on all the ladies. So they're covered in seeds, man, already. Week 2, week 3, they're already covered in seeds. All right, next question.
That shit is pretty to watch, man. It reminds me of the movie Blow, when that chick is blowing the cocaine throughout the stuff, but it's the pollen, obviously. But the way that it kind of dances in the air reminds me of that.
It does. It's made to catch wind.
Yeah, it looks really cool.
It hangs.
From Dan Estridge, yo, how do I get rid of snails?
Somebody gave an answer up here. I don't remember.
You can.
Said something.
Yeah, he said you can build a moat with like beer. Like, I'm not. I guess give some more details on how you would do that. That's one option. If you're trying to like mechanically stop them, the other option would be like wrapping the stalk with something sticky. But there is a product called Sluggo, and that product will stop snails. It's like a granular. You sprinkle it on the ground, they eat that, and it kills them. Omri listed, all that happy fun stuff. So if you're okay with that product, there is a product out there that does do that.
I mean, I would think you could grab some of them and decimate the population after a couple of, really good gatherings of snails. But
it stops slugs, obviously, too. Slugs and snails. It's supposed to. I mean, if like the gray roly polies eat it, supposedly it kills them. I've heard of it being used as a, like something you put in your indoor raised bed pots to stop the gray roly polies. But I've also read that I've read in their SDS sheet, which is like the safety data sheets that Sluggo provides with their product. That product specifically kills earthworms. So if you're in a closed loop system, I think that's detrimental. I would not use that as an option against roly-polies. There's other things you can do against them, but I wouldn't go that route.
The next one here. I just wanted to highlight, I've been playing around with a lot more insect frasses and building up the isopod stuff. I wouldn't necessarily say I'm doing the teas anymore, but it's definitely more of like compost with some IMO, using more cover crops, putting in those exudates, and then playing around with the insect frass. So just wanted to highlight that, see if you guys wanted to add anything to that. But I do think the insect frass is a game changer for people that aren't necessarily familiar with what all that can do with not only the plant but the soil health in general.
Yeah. So the Frass so guys, let's talk about it like we don't know anything about it. All right. As Michael Scott says on The Office, talk to me like I'm a 5-year-old. And then explain it. He's like, talk to me like I'm a 3-year-old. We're just gonna take it straight to the 3-year-old.
Surplus. I know what a surplus is, Michael.
So you've got Frass and vermicompost. Those are really these two things that are similar, but because they're similar because you're going to find the worms in compost and you're going to find the black soldier fly larvae in compost. An insect frass is nothing more and nothing less than the bodies of dead black soldier fly larvae and their excrement. Read it on the back of any frass box. You're going to see basically that right there. Just black soldier fly larvae. So guys, when you get a good compost going, or you do like what I call soil layering, and you just go ahead and compost in place in your garden, in your no-till, just put your food scraps down on the ground, cover them with some grass, whatever. On a good hot day, after a week or so in Oklahoma, you're going to start seeing black soldier flies flying around, going into the grass and out. They're laying eggs. That's what they're doing. And then about maybe a month later, here they come, and they're going to be ferocious all the way into the cold whenever they just can't move anymore. But insect frass is the bodies of little bitty, larvae that are eating food, gathering nutrients up, processing it, and then pooping, using what they need, and then pooping out the rest and leaving it in frass, or leaving it in a black hardened form is what it actually comes out as. It's all over the top of my compost. Anyway, I don't want to go side notes here, but insect frass is highly nutritious. It can be dried and powdered also, is one thing about frass. I don't know if vermicompost really wants to be dried out because you want the microbiology, really. And so the frass can be dried out because there's lots of nutrient in there. That's really the idea of frass. Vermicompost, on the other hand, is where worms poop out. Worms, they like to eat, actually slugs and worms, they like to eat microbiology. They like to eat fungus and bacteria. And when they're eating on that old dead fruit and stuff, they'll get some of the dead fruit, I'm sure, but they're eating microbes because microbes have processed things down already. All they got to do, as Dr. Elaine says, is eat the microbes, crush them enough to get the juices they want, and then they'll poop out the rest into their vermicompost, what we call. And so the vermicompost is full of microbiology along with nutrients. So that's kind of the difference between the two.
You got anything to add to that, Mark?
No. I mean, that's really good explanation. That's exactly how I would look at that.
And then, well, just even to real quick, the biofilm that's coming from those composting worms, we've said it, on the shows before, but having that with the insect frass and the chitin, I mean, these are the building blocks of a utopia kind of world in your soil systems, and you need those building blocks, especially from the chitin. If you're putting it in with like lobster meal, crab meal, and all that, that's going to take a while for that stuff to break down, especially if you don't have the right decomposers. So all of this stuff is kind of almost like chess moves. You're going to set it up, everything's going to be set for a while, and now you're going to just kind of sit and move your pieces around while everything starts to stack up. And there's something to just kind of sitting there and realizing that things are getting better week after week, month after month, year after year. And I notice it even with my isopods. I mean, this is next level stuff for anybody that's playing with soils. All right, next one for Kevin. Will a JLF on fruit scraps be more filled with potassium than like an only greens JLF, which would have more nitrogen?
Yeah, I mean that is the idea. I haven't done any scientific tests or anything like that, but I don't go with that either. I'm not a science guy. I'm a methods guy, right? I try things and see if they work. So if you go with the idea that ripening fruits have higher levels of certain things, potassium being one, is how we understand it. That's the reason K&F makes a fermented fruit juice and uses that often for flour recipes. Yeah, it would make sense that's the way it would be. Now, I would go on to say that there's probably a whole lot more in there, and you could probably use a fruit scraps JLF for veg also. You could just have, if that's all the JLF you could make, use it for veg and for flour. If you have the ability to make multiple JLFs, what are called specific JLFs, then try them, experiment, have fun, learn stuff, and you'll realize that you're not going to always make two of them. You're probably going to end up making one JLF eventually, but experimenting with them helps you form your own style of making things and making your JLF and storage and refilling and understanding how in the summertime it'll bubble up and it'll actually spray out the sides of a tight screwed down olive barrel. And in the wintertime, the water will freeze so hard that it will push the whole lid off the top and it'll spew out the sides even in the wintertime because the top water will freeze so hard and it'll just rise up to the top. So experimenting with this teaches you all these things, and you do a good experimentation on certain inputs for 1 year, it's over. There's no magic to this stuff. It's just learning how to do it. And it's like, oh, okay, that's how you do it. Now, how do I make it good for me and my environment?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo that. I think that harvesting, like, that there is something to considering when you're harvesting the fruits of what you're putting in, whether it be quick growing dynamic greens early in the season, which would make sense that you feed it early in the season, or the underripe fruits for transitional. It's going to have those hormones, and then overripened fruits for latent flower. I mean, it just kind of makes, if you just kind of follow nature's lead, it makes total sense.
Will a shade cloth help plants flower early?
It depends on how much shade the shade cloth creates. How many photons does that thing block out? Because that's what it actually comes down to when you read the science of the of the of the marijuana plant. And I'm here, and listen to me saying I'm the methods guy, but yeah, I do read it. There is a cell, and I don't remember the name of it, in a cannabis plant that when it gets triggered with enough darkness, it will tell the plant, okay, hey, let's start flower. And it's a red shift cell or something like that. But the point is, if it doesn't get enough photons in a day, it says, we're coming to the end. Let's start doing what we do. And it switches it into flower. So if you do block, or if it does block enough photons, it will. And, it's just like putting a cannabis plant, like one of my first years of growing here in Oklahoma with all these trees in my backyard. I started with my cannabis plants in one part of my yard and just had them all there because it was easy to water and get to. And then I was like, well, I want to move them out because I want it to look good and pretty and kind of stuff. And what I noticed was the plants that I had moved towards the trees and they got more shade, they started flowering a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks earlier than a plant 10 feet to 15 feet away, just because it had, 30, 45 minutes, just enough to hold it in veg. So even moving your plants in the shade will cause them to go into flower.
100%. I mean, I can even notice it in my little plot in the back there. And I help a buddy in a greenhouse, and it's 100 feet long. Same story. And it's wide open too. But on the horizon, there's a little bit of tree cover on the left side over there. So it's getting 20 minutes less. And you can, if you're there and you intimately know these plants, you really start to pick up on stuff like that. The only thing that I would worry about with a shade cloth is if you're planning on using it as like a permanent fixture, unless you're in like the South, where you get some crazy heavy suns and it's really, really hot, where you're trying to protect terpenes and stuff from heat degradation, because that does happen down in the desert. But I would just worry about depriving them of the sun that they need during the flowering stage if it's a permanent fixture. So if you're depriving them of some really heavy intensity sun, they're going to end up being obviously, larfy buds, and like they're not going to want to be as beautiful and structurally nice and smokable. So just consider that too.
Yeah.
And then real quick from the same person, can I top feed teas?
Can you top feed teas? Let me answer it in a few ways. I think this might be behind your question. Can you top feed dry teas that you don't even make tea with? The ingredients you might put into a tea, like a Roots Organic kind of a packaged thing. Yeah, you can top feed with that. Water it in, use just a little bit. Can you top feed with an actual liquid tea? Yes, you can top feed with with your teas. I mean, that's the best thing, guys. People always ask me, how often can I feed JLF? how long can I feed JLF, and what's the potency of the JLF while doing this. So I know there's so many people that have a level of questions. Like there's a spectrum of questions from don't know nothing to the guy that knows way more than me. But most of the people that talk to me don't know much because they just get interested on it by seeing my page. And I tell them I've poured JLF the day I cut my plants. I poured JLF on them, just intentionally fed them the day I cut them. This isn't anything like salt newts at all. This is just Mother Nature doing what it does. You didn't add anything. You didn't really subtract anything. You just piled on more stuff. There's so much, like in my soil, there's so many nutrients in there from all the organic material I put down. I really don't even need to use JLF. That is a dry JLF, is organic material. It just breaks down all over your garden. And so I really don't have to use anything once you get your soil established. And I say that takes about 2 years. I mean, I've had a heck of a response from my new no-tills that I made on March 1st. I made 3 30-foot by 4 feet wide no-tills, and those girls are pumping out the stuff. But I showed exactly what I did. I mean, I invested a lot of time, I used up every bit of my compost to try to get those beds going. All of my IMO3, a whole barrel of JLF, and all my bokashi. I mean, I committed to just making it awesome and rich from the very beginning. There's so many worms in there now, that's what's causing all the armadillos wanting to come in there. But anyway, top feed tea, you bet, man.
Happy Dirt Dude, shout out to him. He's here each and every week. Like Kevin had mentioned before a couple of weeks ago, not only listening to what we're doing, but implementing this stuff, and probably in a couple of weeks or months teaching everybody else. So, really cool to see, man. That's the whole point of this, that people actually get their hands dirty, start to make moves in life where they can have their own piece of land to do these kind of things. So from Happy Dirt Dude, any cover crop recommendations for the sandy soil improvements?
Man, I don't have any sandy soil. I've never had to mess with it. Can you help him, Mark?
So we have sandy soil around here, and the stuff that will, what you want to focus on is like your dynamic accumulators. Mullein is a good one. I know that it grows tall, and that's the problem with mullein as a cover crop. But what you want to think about is trying to get nutrients from down below that soil, especially if you're limited on what you can add on top. So I would think about like mullein. What specifically is grown? Yarrow grows well in sandy soil conditions.
I bet sunflowers would grow there because you always see them growing along dirt roads and asphalt walkways and things like that.
In disturbed areas, and they spread too. So stuff like that is what you might want to consider. Other dynamic accumulators, I don't know how well they do in sandy conditions, but like borage, comfrey, mugwort. Mugwort will grow in just about anything. So, and I do have that growing around, and when you keep topping it, it grows out a bit bushier in its cluster. So it does kind of become more useful as a cover, but it is a little bit more pronounced in a presence than like a clover. It's got like a stalk and a root stump, and yeah, mugwort is a weed, but it's also a dynamic accumulator. So it's gonna be chock full of micronutrients. It's gonna grow in tough conditions. So
yeah, in the South too, there's like almost like a redneck way of doing this. And it's getting kudzu from the side of the road. That stuff grows in the Georgia clays, so it'll grow in sandy soils or grow in a living soil. But playing around with that is risky because it is found everywhere. It'll grow up light poles and cause like fire damage and all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's really hard to kill this shit. So you gotta, I guess, think long term. Like, is it okay if this stuff starts to really spread around my property? Do I want to be managing this kind of thing? But if the goal is to get roots into the system and it's just a shitty piece of land that you're trying to improve on, kudzu will help in that process. It's like I said, it's kind of like a redneck way of doing it.
the only other thing
Nice,
is
man.
like if you have a local library, just going there and seeing if they got a seed bank, or like I don't know what they call it, like a seed library basically, but they
Yeah.
usually have like local communities and they're very like close knit, and it doesn't necessarily overlap with us yet, but like these are people that are into promoting beneficials and like monarchs and growing native plants. So those are the types of people in your specific area that you should really talk to figure out what's going to grow best in that climate.
Well said. All right, Kev, my IPM bundle, I have half of each bottle left. Where, uh, where should I start if I wanted to make more of each? Labs, EM5, OHN, Black.
Well, that's a whole lot. So the IPM bundle on OKCalyxshop.com, you get the EM5, the labs, I believe, and the OHN, black or white. And so these things are not like an EM1 where you apply brown sugar labs and multiply microbiology. These things are made specifically and they run out as you use them. So you'd have to learn how to make it, buy more. But yeah, you can definitely learn how to make that stuff. Labs is easy to make, guys. Labs, I'll say it real quick. Labs, here's how you make it. Get 1 pound of rice, dump it in a big container, fill it, cover it with a foot of water, Mix your hand in it. You can use hot water. It helps. Mix your hand, get all that starch into the liquid. Pour that liquid out into another bucket. You can immediately add whole milk. Let it sit there for 2 days. You got labs. That was the whole lab process, man. It is super duper easy. So learn how to make it is what you're going to want to do, Broken Scepter. And if not, get a hold of me. I'll hook you up with another deal for what you bought.
I
Hey,
know
that
all you guys K&F wizards and all this, but I wanted to let you guys know that nothing seems to compare. My wife had some breast milk that spoiled, so I drizzled that shit on some of the plants that are growing a cover crop, and they grew exponentially over just a couple of days. So whatever the hell's going on down there, man, if your wife is pregnant or has got babies young enough to breast milk, if that goes bad, man, dump it on your plants. I saw a noticeable difference just from
Dude,
some spoiled milk.
that stuff is probably has hundreds of nutrients in it.
I
Like
can
you're
only
talking
imagine. Yeah.
tomatoes from your garden. What breast milk is? I mean, God, it's what makes babies start to grow and become big. So yeah, I'm sure it's like amazing.
Well, and if you don't have the breast milk going on, which is pretty quick breast to plant, and I would not be going just for that. I would focus on feeding the baby first. But like Brian said, it went bad, so you're not going to give that to your baby. Um, but the thing about these natural farming inputs, especially like the ones that Kevin offers, is that they just take time, right? So there's no better time than now to start working on them, because you're going to find that it's going to be a lot of hurry up and wait, a long period of time, and you'll start to understand why they have the price tag that they do, usually the good stuff, because it takes time.
Kevin, what is the best way to apply BT granules? And then Mark, I'm sure you
Well,
can add to that.
I have never applied BT granules. I have only applied BT in liquid foliar form. And the best way to apply that is no longer. I mean, I'm done with it. I sprayed last week one time with a spray of BT, and I'm in week 1-ish, 2. I'm right there where I don't know what I'm in really until I can see more flower develop. But I'm week 1 or week 2. Had a big rain last night. Plants are totally cleaned up real well now, and so nothing gets sprayed but my organic materials, like what we were talking about earlier, the OHN5, maybe a little bit, or sorry, the OHN white or black, the EM5. I won't spray any labs. I don't need labs up there. We're good to go. I mean, they're clean. The plants are healthy. They don't need a lot of stuff. And when I say I use that, what I mean is to a 32-ounce bottle, I can bring it down on scale. A 32-ounce bottle, a normal spray bottle, I would use 1 teaspoon, the small one, not table, teaspoon, the small one, 1 teaspoon of OHN, 1 teaspoon of EM5. That's it. Shake it up. I'll scale that up if I need use my big Petra sprayer, but that's not much at all. I don't want a lot. I don't, because guys, that has alcohol in it. Both of those have vodka or rum in it, and they have a lot of a lot of citrus in it, like limes and lemons and oranges, and cinnamon and garlic and all that stuff. That can burn. It can burn a delicate little flower if you go dumping that all over. You just want a little bit, just like a little cleaning, a little scrubbing, a little maintenance, and just move on. Less is always more when your soil is good to go.
So the BT granules, generally those granules are going to be the BTI, which is for that. The BTI is a strain that goes after like the mosquitoes and the fungus gnats. And BTI works on kind of like a short to midterm, in my opinion, because they for whatever reason they build a resistance. They figure out a way to eat around it. I don't know what it is, but to answer the question, the best way to use BT granules is generally to like soak them in a tea, as opposed to sprinkling them on top. Because
Foliar?
So with the foliar, the only reason you do the foliar is with the BT Christaki, which is for the caterpillars and moths and stuff like that, which is, to me, BT Christaki is a huge fix for a big problem, and it's really the only answer that we have right now for that problem. Relying on predatories to stop an invasion of moths or greenhorn worms or whatever inchworms, you know what I mean? Just whatever it is that's getting in there, there's nothing that can stop them like BT Christaki, that foliar spray. The BT granules, in my opinion, they just don't work long term, and that's why we developed the biodiversity packs, because that is the long-term fix. And even you can use them in conjunction with one another. Like the BT granules, if you use those as a tea early on, it can help to knock them back early. But do keep in mind that you're kind of starving those beneficials of their food. So you want those beneficials to eat well so that they reproduce well. So sometimes it's just better to lay in wait, because it's a numbers game. Like we talked about last week with Andrew, it's a numbers game. So
That was weird, man. It sounded like a remix. I don't know if that sounded like numbers game.
Sorry, freaking.
That's what it sounded like.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, just echoed. And if you have green hornworms, the bearded dragons, man, they'll eat those. They will gorge themselves on that. So that's something to easily just let them run around, get to town on that.
Yeah, sorry about the technical issues. My microphone, if I tap it lightly, it just like disconnects. So I need to get a new one. But yeah, no, it's a numbers game. So yeah, to me, it's like relying on biology is always better than relying on a product.
For Kevin, what's the best approach to amount of usage, ml per gallons, to adding KNF inputs in your garden?
I mean, that's a lot of. I could take. There's a lot of inputs. So, let's say I want to use labs to a gallon. Man, I'm not a big measurer. I'm a this much to that much kind of a guy. I use 5-gallon buckets as my measurements, but to a gallon, I would probably use no more. Well, I'd probably go down to tablespoons with labs. I'd probably use 2 to 3 tablespoons in a gallon. That's what I would use. OHN, I'd probably use 1 tablespoon. I don't know how many milliliters that is, guys. I can't do the math. Let's say I wanted to use like humic acids, man. If humic acids to a gallon, I'd use half a cup of humic acids. Let's say I want to use fermented plant juice to a gallon. I love fermented plant juice because the simplicity and the availability of it. I would probably put a solid cup, maybe a cup and a half of fermented plant extract in a gallon of water, expecting to, take a red Solo cup and just feed it to a couple of plants. That's what I would do. Let's say JLF to a gallon. I would feed probably half a cup of JLF to a gallon, maybe a cup to a gallon. So again, not a whole lot. Again, because here's the thing: Brandon Rust does a really good job of talking about this. Always talks over my head, but I always pick up a lot of gold from him and just kind of have a better understanding. He talks about when you use nutrients, the amount of available nutrients that go into the soil opposed to the amount of nutrients the plant actually consumes is a massive, massive difference. Like we are dumping way too much nutrient. The plant doesn't even eat anywhere close to what's being dumped in that cocoa soil, whatever the case may be. And so whenever you get a cup of 2-year-old JLF, man, that is nutrient dense. It has a lot of nutrients in it, man. So a half a cup of good JLF into a gallon, it's loaded. It's loaded for bear. Could you use more? Yes. You could probably put 2 cups into a gallon, 3 cups into a gallon. I mean, it's JLF. You can really use a lot. And plants just absorb it quite well. It seems to work great in soil. But here's the point: you don't need to. Whenever you get into making inputs, and if you get into doing it like I do it, and like these boys do it, where we can survive and feed our family with these side jobs where we hustle, you can make so much input. But then after a while, you're like, I don't need this much input. I'm never going to use the 2 barrels of JLF I've got. I just kind of go back and forth over the years, man. I could really just use one. I could really probably use 2 compost barrels instead of 3. And I could always make way less fermented plant extract, because I just don't use it, but I make a lot because I do it for the business side of things also, and try to make good products for other people who do not have the ability to make them. They might live in apartments. They might live on a place where they say you can't make stinky stuff. So you don't have to use a lot. Always use less. And my point is always this: if your soil is good, you really don't ever even have to use anything, guys. Again, dry JLF, i.e. green manure, i.e. plant material, chop and drop. That method right there is going to do you the best by far for the least amount of work. Just chop and drop your stuff down. Your soil is going to get good. Before you know it, you'll just be spraying tap water on your soil for the whole summer.
Yeah, I was explaining that to somebody in the more like reptile space. They're like, chop and drop. Can you explain that? And I said, fall. Think fall. And I feel like that allowed it to click for him.
Yeah.
All right, this last one, especially because we try to respect everybody's time on a Friday night. I just wanted to put this out there. I thought, obviously, kind of a pillar of the community. I'm not on Instagram as much, to be honest. I don't find it as fun anymore. But I wanted to ask kind of what happened there. I saw that you guys kind of knew more about it than I did.
No,
I just saw they a couple snapped over in storms.
Yeah, he's got some big ones. I've got mine are huge too. I mean, his plants are big. We all got them big. He lives probably with an hour to an hour and a half of where I am also. So we're very similar zones. You can see in his backyard, he's got lots of trees too. He doesn't have just full sun going. His plants are huge back there, like mine are huge. But he had a big storm come through and they weren't tied up. They weren't all tied up. The side branches weren't tied up. They're big. He's busy, man. He's not going to go out there and just spend a whole lot of time. He doesn't have a whole lot of time.
I think he even said it. Yeah, he even said it in his video that he didn't have them tied up or something like that. So, but it's an homage and a testament to kind of what we were talking about earlier. It's easy to get to that 90 percentile, or to 90% done, even 75% done. You start getting into this to game time now, when the branches start getting heavier. This is kind of like where you separate the boys from the men, so to speak, as far as how much you're going to produce. Not saying that Brandon Rust is a boy and we're men at all. That was a bad correlation. But what I'm saying is this is where how much you are willing to put into it is going to show and come out. And that's why Kevin's at the pro level, and listening to people like Kevin, has really helped me to get to where I'm at, to where I feel comfortable to share this information, because year after year. It works, man. So what was I gonna say? I forgot. But yeah, Brandon Russ plants. He even admits it himself. I mean, he's all over the place. So he was with like Yellow Wolf. He's doing like some collab with Yellow Wolf the rapper. So, he's all over the
I
place.
think he's
So
doing it with his mom.
yeah, Mama Wolf. Yeah.
And then
Uh,
a last minute question came through us
yeah.
for Stone Mason.
Yeah,
Kevin, do you grow?
do I grow horsetail or do I harvest it wild? I harvest it wild. I harvest the bamboo wild, the horsetail wild, all of my IMO3. I wildcraft it all, and the horsetail actually grows in the creek or along the creek just straight here behind my house. And so yeah, I go there and I have 3 5-gallon buckets full of horsetail fermented plant extract right now that I'm not using, but I made.
I'll reach out to you about that, Kev, because it's a seasonal treat that I love to offer, and I can't offer it right now. I don't have a source of it like close to me here to harvest and make my own.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. So I'll reach out to you.
super light. I mean, bet I could get you. You could probably make 2 5-gallon buckets full of fermented horsetail extract with a big box full, UPS box full.
That would be awesome. I'd love that. Yeah.
Real good.
Yeah, that'd be great. It does grow around here in Michigan. It is widely found, I think, across the country in a lot of different zones. So just do a little research around where you're at, do some talking to people, figure out what it looks like, obviously. But it does grow everywhere, man. It's when it's abundant, you can make it, dude. And there's a lot of places where it doesn't grow too. So there you go.
One thing about horsetail fermented plant extract as opposed to sunflower is sunflower starts to stink and smell like JLF. You have to clean it a lot and get all the bits and pieces out. I even have to screen it sometimes, cheesecloth it. Fermented horsetail plant extract, it never stinks, man. It always has a good clean smell to it.
That's good to know, man, especially for people that are getting into this that have kids or wife. All right, Kevin, did you want to pick that the question that you felt was worthy of Mr. Kid Mac's shipments?
Yes, sir, I do. Kid Mac, I hope he's still listening. He probably passed out on his rocking chair with his Puffco in his lap. But we're going to send out 2 packages. We're going to send one to Herbal Grow. As long as you're in the States, you got to be in the States. This is Kid Mac sending the stuff out. Herbal Grower with the JLF question and Happy Dirt Dude with the soil improvement question. You guys need to DM at Kid Mac, KIDMAC, at Kid Mac. Say one of the questions on the Friday Night Live, and we're going to get you a nice package of all FEM seeds, and they're fire. They're what we're all growing right now, guys.
Oh yeah,
great show catching up with you guys. It's always a pleasure chit-chatting and man, just talking at a higher level about this stuff, and with everybody tuned in who's asking these awesome questions. It's really appreciated. Brian, what you got going on over there, brother?
my wife just had a little surgery yesterday, so just kind of behind the scenes trying to take care of stuff. Again, we're just real appreciative that at the beginning of the week and each week shipping out a lot more stuff all the time. So I know I probably sound like a broken record, but I'm just very grateful that I get to do all this from my house and I get to raise my children while I'm doing it. And it's because of the people that support us, support the show, and learning from Kevin and Mark has allowed me to have the kind of business where I don't have the fungus gnats. I don't have kind of all the other nuances that a lot of isopod breeders have. And I feel like I'm very fortunate in that, because most people in my little world are afraid to put anything on a soil system because the fungus gnats are there almost immediately. So just again, just salute to everybody that wants to learn and improve and then find a way to make a little money for themselves and their family. That's what I've always been about. What you got, Kevin?
Yeah. So let me. I want to highlight a couple of things real quick because we might end up talking about these things. I posted this on my Instagram, Sakuteki. This is a translation of the oldest gardening book we have in the world. It's a treatise on Japanese gardening. It is fantastic. It goes into the meaning of gardening through the Japanese perspective. And the reason I got that book is because I'm trying to help people understand as clearly as I can how when the founders of KNF and Jadam went over to Japan to learn gardening methods and then brought them back to Korea and then called them Korean natural farming, what we need to understand is we need to learn from Korean natural farming like they learned from Japanese natural farming and now make it our own Oklahoma natural farming, Michigan natural farming, Colorado natural farming. Whatever you want to do, it's your environment natural farming. Don't, and this probably causes some fights with people, but that's not what I'm trying to do. There's no need to stick to KNF at all. You do not have to use the KNF recipes. You don't have to do any of that stuff to grow cannabis. Can you? Yes. It's an entire system that has been developed to grow food, grow vegetables, grow medicine. However, you're going to have to understand the rules, the recipes, all the materials that you'll be using, how long you need to stir it, cook it, store it, all those things. Whereas opposed to the way I'm trying to teach you is look around, follow nature, understand what she's doing. Like Bryan said, it's the fall. See what she's doing. She's fertilizing herself right now, and get in with the program and follow and participate in what she does. And man, this book right here, that Sakuteki, I guess you can see it. Anyway, can't hardly see it.
Must have a lot of blue and
Yeah,
Put it by your chest. Put it right by your chest.
there we go, guys. I see that word. That's what you want to type in. Sakuteiki. I'm sure you can get an online translation or something. But they go into wonderful meanings of how to garden and why you would do things for your own benefit. And I want to tell you one thing that stuck out to me was this: the idea of distance gardening. And what that would mean is you might put a beautiful cherry tree, willow tree right here, and you would set a beautiful place to sit down and maybe enjoy. And then about 10 feet, 20 feet in front of you, you would have two rocks that might block part of your view. But in between the two rocks is a beautiful waterfall, mountain, field of flowers, something like that. And it was called gardening at a distance. And it was teaching you how to bring the outer environment into your garden based on positionings and just being able to sit and look and enjoy. It was fantastic, guys. But that's what was in that book. So there'll be probably a show where we kind of talk about that and what I've learned. And then, guys, the other one right here, Farmers of 40 Centuries, Organic Farming in China, Korea, and Japan, F.K. King. This book right here, it's a lot of details, a lot of numbers, but what you start to see is in these communities, the whole community in a town, the whole community would participate in keeping their urine, their poop, their green manure. And in a week during the early spring, they would bring all these vessels out and put them in the street, and the farmers would gather it all and take it to the fields. And it just shows how this whole system worked organically. So 2 great books. So one last thing, October 19th, I've got my immersive class with Growcast. You can sign up for it still. We've got about 10 tickets left, growcastpodcast.com. Mark, thanks. What about you?
So that is that really the collection of poop and pee and all that as a means of filling the void in their season and that early spring when you really need all that extra nitrogen. Great example of how we used to be before we got full of ourselves. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, not necessarily sanitation standards and stuff improved, and then we started getting force fed on chemical nutrients, and so that's where all that is completely lost, and where we're trying to peel back a little bit to show you that you don't necessarily have to poop and pee in a vessel, but you can do a lot of simple things in your backyard to really be successful. And where if you're not starting up your own business to make money, we hope that where you can make money is learning how to save money, and grow and flex the 10-cent fucking ounces. You know what I mean? Or the 10-cent grams of hash, and that's no joke. It can be that cheap.
Yes.
Kevin does it in his backyard, and it's kind of like he's documenting and showing that, and it's amazing when you really stop and think about what it is that he's showing there, and that's exactly what I'm doing in the backyard too. I got my side hustle with beneficials, and that's my passion too as well. And if you're ever looking for some spicy springtails to zest up your soil, I really do think that there is an application for these guys to help with your nutrient cycling and your living soil pots. But also in the bioactives, that's where there's a parallel, is that diversity also helps with cleaning up after reptiles and stuff. So it's really a pleasure to be here, trying to bridge that gap between us natural farmers, the bioactive folks, and just peeling back the kind of the curtain on what's going on in our gardens. Always a pleasure having time with you, Kevin. If it's like VIP access.
Good talk, guys, and all y'all watching. Excellent questions that you guys asked. This is how we want to do it. We can ask anything and ask questions, and then get on here and tell us, "Hey, I did this today, man," and let us know, because we do not know everything. There are so many methods and so many environments to experiment in that we just can't know it all. Often it won't even apply to our environment, but it's good to have the knowledge, because we can maybe share out with your knowledge.
The knowledge should be contagious. That's where we're at, and that's why it's fun to answer the questions. Thank you guys so much for your time. Thank everybody for the questions. Congrats to the winners. And till next week, guys, keep it organic, stay busy, and get ready for next season. Let's roll.